11 Coronation Street, spoilers for next week 14th to the 18th of April. 1. A familiar flirtation turns complicated for Abby. What began as harmless flirtation in Freshco's car park takes an awkward turn for Abby next week on Coronation Street. After a light-hearted exchange with a stranger who cheekily stole her parking space, Abby soon discovers the charming man isn't just any passerby, he's family. Abby recounts the amusing encounter to Kevin and Debbie at the bistro, only to return from the restroom and find the same man now sitting at their table. The revelation is swift and mortifying. Debbie and Kevin introduce him as Carl, their younger brother. Though now introduced as family, Carl hasn't exactly dialed down the flirting. His continued charm offensive is leaving Abby increasingly uneasy, especially with his close proximity becoming a regular occurrence. As Kevin faces another round of chemotherapy, Abby hopes for some private time with her husband. She gently asks Carl to step back for the day so she and Kevin can have some moments alone following the treatment. Instead, Carl offers to accompany Kevin to the hospital himself. But when Abby tries to reach them later, it's Carl who answers Kevin's phone announcing they're already back and enjoying a drink at the Rovers. Abby is livid. Storming into the pub, Abby lets Carl have it, accusing him of hijacking her carefully planned afternoon. Kevin walks in mid-confrontation, confused by the tension between his wife and brother, and demands to know what he's walked into. Later in the week, the family reunites for a wedding menu tasting at Debbie's hotel. The event is meant to be festive, but an undercurrent of concern lingers. Debbie has just been to a memory clinic and may be dealing with early dementia. Still, she puts on a brave face, determined to embrace life. With Kevin forced to retreat home early due to chemo side effects, Abby finds herself alone with Carl once again. In a moment of vulnerability, Carl confides that his business in Germany is collapsing, and he's under immense financial strain. Carl admits he may need to return to Germany to deal with his struggling business. But guilt about abandoning Kevin weighs heavily. Abby, though privately eager for Carl's departure, reassures him Kevin will understand. When Carl finally shares the news with Kevin, the reaction is one of heartbreak. Will Carl choose to stay or leave? 2. Theo has another shock for Todd. The mystery of why Todd's new love interest Theo had been blowing hot and cold was revealed last week, when Theo came into the Undertakers in the company of his wife, Danielle. Todd was understandably furious about the revelation, but there's a further shock to come which could make things even more complicated. Next week, Todd reveals to Sarah that he hasn't had any sleep. After terminally ill Aunt Julie was up all night in pain, Sarah offers Todd a spare key to her flat in order to let himself in and get some rest whenever he needs to. A short time later, Theo and Danielle return to the Undertakers as they continue to prepare for Danielle's mother's funeral. But Todd is stunned when he sees that they have two teenage children, Miles and Millie, in tow. The pair only have time to exchange a few words whilst Danielle and the kids are out of earshot. But as Theo follows Todd back to Sarah's flat, he begs for a chance to explain. 3. Sarah gets drawn into Theo's lies. The two seem to come to an understanding, with Todd admitting that whilst Theo is unable to make any commitment at the moment, he still really likes him and wants to continue seeing him. When Theo later nips out to speed doll, he leaves his phone in the flat, which promptly goes off with a text from Danielle. Panicking, Todd begs Sarah to go and find Theo at speed doll in order to give him his phone. But Sarah's intervention only leads to more confusion, leading Danielle to believe that Todd and Sarah are a couple. 4. Todd kisses Sarah. Later in the week, Sarah is due to meet Kit for a date in the bistro, and has a drink with Todd whilst she waits. Of course, who should then turn up but Danielle? Aware that Danielle thinks he and Sarah are an item, Todd feels he has to invite Danielle to join them for a drink, with Sarah forced to play along. Things become particularly awkward when Theo arrives, with the four now inadvertently attending a double date together. Purposely winding Theo up, Todd plants a kiss on Sarah, much to the bemusement of Kit, who has just arrived. Sarah is mortified when she realizes that Kit has seen her, and is left with some explaining to do. 5. A desperate Sean hits a new low. Elsewhere on the Cobbles, Sean finds himself facing further demands from STC inmate Brody, who is promising to make life hell for Sean's son Dylan unless he complies. Sean has already been forced to smuggle a burner phone for Brody into the STC, slipping it into STC tutor Daniel's bag in order for Dylan to retrieve whilst in class. Next week, Brody forces Dylan to carry out an errand for him, leaving him alone in Dylan's room where he soon finds his list of phone numbers written down. Noting Sean's number, Brody later gives him a call and demands £500 in cash. Not having that sort of money to hand, yet desperate to protect his son, Sean has to think fast to try and raise the funds. When he asks Glenda if she's able to lend him £500, she can't help but wonder whether he's in any sort of trouble. Later, in the factory, there's shock when George and Eileen discover that the money from a collection jar set up for Julie's bucket list fund has been swiped. A short time later, Sean rushes down Victoria Street and texts Brody, telling him that he's got the cash and is heading to the arranged meeting point to meet Brody's contact. But has Sean really stooped so low as to steal from his dying housemate? 6. Daniel discovers Sean's deceit. On Friday, desperate to put an end to the hold that Brody has over him, Sean finds himself confessing to Daniel about planting the burner phone in his bag. He begs a furious Daniel to try and retrieve it, as it would contain evidence proving what a nasty piece of work Brody is. But with the news that Sean had put his job at risk by planting the phone, will Daniel be willing to help? 7. Daisy discovers Jenny's plan. Over at the Rovers, Daisy is devastated when Jenny finally reveals to her that Carla is putting the pub up for sale, having run out of patience in waiting for the pair to repay the money they stole from her. Jenny is hoping to buy the pub herself, using a £60,000 windfall she's recently received to help gain a business loan. But she's opting to not tell Daisy this. Jenny is unaware that Daisy already knows about the windfall, however, and has cooked up a scheme with Mum Christina to try and scam Jenny out of the money, believing they should be entitled to it as it came from shares set up by Daisy's father Gregory. Hitting the beverages as she takes in the news of the pub being put up for sale, a tipsy Daisy can't help but make some barbed comments towards Carla when she later comes into the pub. Christina then overhears Carla telling Jenny that she'd be much better off buying the pub off her without Daisy's involvement, calling her a spoiled madam. Christina later relays the conversation to Daisy in private, revealing that Jenny is planning to buy the pub, and the pair double down on their vow to take her down. 8. Dee vows to fight. Elsewhere, Dee is determined to make Weatherfield General accountable for the life-threatening issues she faced during her labor, which led to her having an emergency hysterectomy. Dee had tried to tell various staff that something wasn't right, and it wasn't until she passed out that midwife Zoe realized that she was suffering from a postpartum hemorrhage. Dee is firmly in the belief that the color of her skin had played a part in the attitude she received during her treatment, and friend Aaliyah has vowed to support her in making a complaint to the hospital. Next week, Dee talks with a representative of the Patient Advice and Liaison Service who assure her that they're investigating her complaint and are confident that Zoe was to blame for the incident. As Dee leaves the hospital, she's disgusted to find Asha having it deep and meaningful with Zoe. Dee confronts Zoe, who, whilst sorry for what she went through, continues to deny that any of it was her own fault. Asha later calls to see Dee and asks if she will reconsider her complaint, pointing out that Zoe could lose her job, but Dee remains firm, asserting that she was subject to racism during her treatment. Dee later bumps into Wes on the street, a kindly nurse who had also been there on the day that Dee gave birth. But as the two chat, little does Dee realize that Wes is actually Zoe's brother. On Friday, Dee is frustrated to learn that the hospital has completed its investigation, but have found no wrongdoing on Zoe's part. Later attending a support group with Aaliyah, Dee learns that all of the women there have experienced a traumatic birth, showing that there's clearly a much wider issue at play. Back at the Rovers, Dee shares that black women are 4 times more likely to die during childbirth, leaving the women around her stunned. She later confronts Asha, making it clear that if the hospital refuses to hold Zoe accountable, then she'll have to take matters into her own hands. What does DD have planned? 9. Gemma helps Lou score a job. Over at number 5, Gemma finds herself in an awkward situation when she ends up owing Lou a favor. Gemma and Chesney are trying to distance themselves from Lou and husband Mick after discovering that he was the anonymous van driver that Chesney had waged war with. They're unaware that Mick knows exactly who Chesney is though, who has vowed to play the long game. When Chesney is offered an opportunity to work a food festival in London for an absent dev, he is worried about leaving Gemma home alone with the 5 kids. Gemma's grateful when Lou offers to help out with childcare so that Chesney can take the job, but soon finds herself having to return the favor when Lou spots that there's a stylist job going in Audrey's salon. With Gemma to back her up, Lou makes out to a dubious Audrey that she's an accomplished stylist. Audrey reluctantly agrees to give Lou a trial period, but can't help but wonder what she's let herself in for. 10. Lou clashes with Maria. Sure enough, it's not long before Asha brings news to Gemma that Lou is causing havoc in the salon. Concerned, Gemma rushes over and walks in just as a heated argument is erupting between Lou and Maria. Things quickly escalate, and when Lou lashes out by flinging hair dye at her, Maria has had enough and fires her on the spot. As Lou storms out, Gemma follows and finds her in a vulnerable state. Lou opens up, admitting she's having a tough time at the moment as she's terrified for her son. Who could that possibly be? Later, Audrey states that she is going to give Lou another chance, pointing out how many clients she's brought in, much to Maria's frustration. 11. Doran sticking around. Also next week, Tyrone is delighted when he learns that son Doran will be staying with them for longer than originally expected. Tyrone's ex Alina was forced to send Doran to stay with his dad last week after her home in Romania was destroyed in a flood. But it seems that it's going to take much longer than anticipated for Alina to get back on her feet. And whilst it's bad news for Alina, it means all the more time for Tyrone to bond with his son. It's also good news for Cassie, who came close to losing her family entirely when Tyrone and Fizz threw her out following the revelation that she'd been spiking Ken. With Cassie back under their roof following an intervention from Evelyn, Tyrone admits to Fizz that he's had a change of heart and that it will do Cassie some good to spend more time with her grandson. Will Doran's presence provide some of the healing that the family needs? Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more movie spoilers next week. Goodbye and see you again.